At first, everything seemed to be falling into place. After months of silent fights, arguments that ended with doors slamming and empty stares at breakfast, he came home one night and said, "I've made an appointment for therapy. I want to try to save us." It was like a breeze after a long storm. I knew we were hanging by a thread, that any spark could bring everything crashing down, but his attitude gave me a glimmer of hope. It was what I wanted to hear most. I remember my eyes filling with tears, not because I was sad, but because I wanted to believe that this was a sign, a beginning of change, that he wanted the same thing I did, to fix things, to fight, to get back what we once had. He started going out twice a week. He always said his sessions were on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 p.m. He would come back around 9:30 p.m. At first, he really seemed lighter. He even started talking more, touching me more, making comments about how he was starting to see things differently. It was everything I had hoped for, but something didn't feel right. It wasn't just intuition. There were small signs, a different scent of perfume, which wasn't mine, a parking ticket with the name of a restaurant on it, not the therapy clinic, a movie ticket in the trash, which he said he threw away after Sunday lunch with a friend. There was always an explanation, quick, convincing, and delivered in a calm tone of voice. But the frequency of these slip-ups began to bother me. He had always been very careful with details, and suddenly he seemed sloppy, or maybe just confident that I would never suspect anything. The first spark came from a friend of mine. During a casual conversation, she mentioned that she saw him entering a cafe with a woman, and she didn't look like a therapist. She was a tall blonde woman with whom he laughed, gestured a lot, and seemed comfortable. At the time, I felt a chill, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. Maybe it's his therapist, I said, but deep down, a part of me was already starting to put the pieces together. When he got home, I casually asked, "How was your session today?" He replied naturally, describing a deep conversation about emotional responsibility, even quoting a metaphor that the supposed therapist had used. It seemed real, very real, but it was all made up. Over the next few days, I started to observe him, without confronting him. He always left his phone on Do Not Disturb mode, with notifications hidden. He had a password that he didn't use before. I started to write down the times he left and the places he said he was going. And then came the last straw. He forgot his smartwatch at home. Curious, I opened the Route app. Instead of Clinica Vita Plena, which was where he told me he was going, the GPS showed that he had been on a residential street on the other side of town for 2 hours. When I confronted him about it, he became visibly nervous. He said that the therapist had changed addresses, that it was temporary, that he forgot to mention it. But the sweat on his hands, the tremor in his voice, didn't lie. That same week, he left his cell phone charging in the living room and went to take a shower. I didn't want to invade his privacy, I swear, but at that point, it was as if my instincts were screaming louder than my morals. I opened his cell phone, which by some miracle was still unlocked, and went straight to WhatsApp. That's when everything came to light. Her name was Helena, a name that had come up in the past, the ex, the one who had broken up with him years ago, but who he always said was dead and gone. "We don't have anything anymore. She hurt me too much." Well, their conversation was anything but dead. There were messages from weeks, months, photos in places he said he had gone alone, printouts of songs that reminded them of the beginning, declarations hidden between jokes. "You're still my safe place," he wrote one night when he told me he couldn't sleep because therapy was messing with his emotions. At that moment, I realized I was in a 3-way relationship without knowing it. And worse, I was the only one who didn't know. They had dates set, fixed places, a schedule that coincided exactly with the sessions. He used therapy as an excuse to go see her, and I, stupidly, still offered him a ride, asked how he was feeling, prepared a light dinner for when he got back, and there was more. In one of the messages he wrote, "She still thinks I'm fighting for us, but honestly, I've already made up my mind." That sentence destroyed me. I read it over and over again. He had already made up his mind. I was just the official girlfriend, the facade, stability while he satisfied his ex behind the scenes. I decided not to confront him yet. I needed to be sure of everything. The next day when he left for therapy, I followed him. I took a taxi and asked the driver to follow his car, and there with my own eyes I saw him stop in front of a building. She got out. She smiled. She got in the car, and they drove away, together, not to the clinic, but to a restaurant, the same one that appeared on the parking ticket days ago. It was like watching a movie in slow motion, a movie in which I was the naive character, deceived, cast aside. I returned home in shock. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or the level of manipulation involved. He used pain, vulnerability, and the "I want to save us" speech as a cover to relive a past that should have remained buried. And the cruelest part? While he was rebuilding his story with his ex, he made me carry the guilt for not being patient enough, understanding enough, partner enough. In the days that followed, I became a shadow of myself. I could barely eat or sleep, but I kept pretending. I needed to plan my exit calmly, until one night, after another session, he came back smiling. I looked him in the eyes and asked, "Therapy has been good for you, right?" He smiled and said, "It's made me see everything more clearly. We still have a chance." And I, with a lump in my throat, just replied, "That's good, because I finally see everything clearly too." From that moment on, everything changed inside me. I was no longer hurt. I was furious, the kind of rage that comes after weeks of deception, sleepless nights, and fake smiles in front of him. And it wasn't uncontrolled anger. No, it was cold, silent, calculated. I knew that if I wanted to get out of that situation with my head held high, and with what little dignity I had left, I would have to play his game until the end. But now, on my terms, the theater he had put on for me, I was going to take down scene by scene, and he was going to watch it all with nowhere to run. I decided to keep up the facade for a few more days. My eyes no longer sparkled, but my voice still sounded sweet. I cooked for him. I asked him how his sessions had gone. I even made comments like, "I'm glad you're more centered." And he, the clown that he was, swallowed it all with a satisfied smile, thinking he still had everything under control, thinking I was blind, that I would never find out. He had no idea that while he was making plans with his ex behind my back, I was organizing my own escape, emotional, mental, and physical. And then Friday came. The blessed Friday of sessions. I already knew the script. He would take a shower, put on too much cologne for an appointment, put on the same denim shirt he always wore to see her, and leave with a quick kiss saying, "I'll be right back, love." And that's exactly what happened. Only this time, I was ready. This time, I had a plan. I waited 10 minutes after he left. I grabbed my phone, my purse, and called a car. I knew exactly where he was going because he had already arranged to meet her at the same restaurant in the upscale neighborhood he liked so much. And there I went, not to confront him, not yet, but to observe, to record, to have living proof of the disgusting charade he was putting on while saying he was trying to save us. I arrived before them. I sat at a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance. And when he arrived, accompanied by her, holding hands, laughing like a teenager in love, it was like being punched in the stomach. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around. He was confident, calm. So was she. They acted like a solid couple, while I was the ghost girlfriend, the one who waited for him to come back from the doctor's office with discoveries about himself. But what happened next was the real turning point. I filmed it. I photographed it. I recorded the smiles, the kiss on the corner of his mouth, her hand on his knee. I recorded the exact moment when he said, "I'm so glad you understand me. With her, everything is so difficult, so heavy." And she replied, "But soon all this will be over, and it will just be us." At that moment, my hand trembled, because I understood that he wasn't just cheating on me. He was replacing me, substituting me, planning a disguised exit under the guise of maturity, so he could later come with the classic, "It's not your fault, it's mine" speech. I already knew this type, and now he was going to get the ending he deserved. I went home before him. I got everything ready. I took the bags he used for business trips and put all his clothes inside. Every pair of underwear, every sock, every cologne he used to go see her. I left everything at the door. I made copies of the videos, saved the screenshots, and wrote a letter. Not to ask for explanations, but to let him know that I knew, that I had seen everything, that he wasn't dealing with a fragile, broken woman, but with someone who had had enough time to pick up all the pieces and turn them into a knife. When he came in, it was too late. He was startled when he saw the suitcases. "What happened?" he asked, still trying to feign surprise. with the serenity that only someone who has been torn apart inside can understand. I just handed him the envelope with the evidence. "Your session today was good, wasn't it?" I said, looking him in the eye. He hesitated. He tried to smile. He tried to lie. And I just continued. "If you want, I can book the next one, but it'll have to be with a lawyer." He opened the envelope, and his smile faded. In seconds, the confident man turned into a scared boy. He mumbled incoherent phrases. "It's not what it looks like. You're overreacting. I was going to tell you." The classic cheater's playbook. But I didn't let him finish, because at that moment, I didn't need anything else. I already had everything: the truth, liberation, and the certainty that he was never worth the effort I put into that relationship. And it was there, between packed suitcases and hard truths, that his charade came to an end. But my story was just beginning. The next morning, the house was strangely quiet. For the first time in months, the heavy atmosphere was gone, but not because everything was fine. It was the silence after the explosion. He left that night with his bags in hand, his head down, and none of his rehearsed excuses working. There was simply nothing left to say. He had been exposed, and not with shouting, not with drama, but with the raw truth rubbed in his face. And there, between dry tears and choked words, the mask came off for good. He couldn't pretend anymore that he was a confused guy trying to fix things. He was just a coward, incapable of ending one relationship before starting another. And I was the woman he underestimated. In the days that followed, it slowly sank in. Waking up alone was strange at first, I won't lie. There was the physical side, of course. His pillow, the space in the bed, the sound of the shower in the morning. But what hurt the most was the psychological side, the feeling of having been deceived on so many levels. He didn't just lie about being in therapy. He created a narrative, a character, an entire plot. He manipulated every detail of the story to make me feel safe, hopeful, while he rebuilt his past with his ex. And the cruelest part of all, he used the rhetoric of vulnerability, mental health, rebuilding the couple, as if he were doing something noble, as if he were fighting for us. But it was that same pain that started to push me forward, because after the shock came lucidity, and with it, a brutal clarity. I had been alone in that relationship for much longer than I had imagined. He had already left emotionally months ago. The difference was that now I had left too, and with that came a new version of myself, a version that was tired of carrying dead weight, of taking responsibility for two, of romanticizing signs of emotional abandonment as if they were difficult phases. I decided to do something he would never have imagined. I was the one who made an appointment with a therapist, for real, not to save a relationship, but to save myself, from my tendency to nullify myself, to believe too much, to accept crumbs and turn them into an emotional feast. In the first few sessions, I cried a lot. I relived everything, from the beginning of the relationship to the first signs of betrayal. But I also began to realize how many times I kept quiet to keep the peace, how many times I failed to speak up, to demand, to confront, for fear of seeming over the top. And there, facing myself, I understood that the relationship had ended long before the betrayal. The infidelity was just the rotten cherry on top of a spoiled cake. And that's when the most difficult and most beautiful process began: rebuilding. I started filling my life with what really made sense. I went back to reading all the books I had put down. I went out with friends he said he couldn't stand. I traveled alone. I got a new haircut. I rearranged the furniture in my living room. I deleted all the photos. And for the first time, I didn't cry while doing it. It was liberating. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about making room for the new, for a life where I didn't have to diminish myself to fit into anyone else's world. The most ironic part? He tried to come back. Of course, they always do. He sent messages. He called. I made a mistake. She wasn't what I thought she was. It was just emotional need, as if that erased everything, as if it were a simple mental confusion, and not a whole plan to betray me while pretending to save me. But this time I didn't need a speech. I just left him hanging. Because absence is the most powerful response there is when someone has used you as a stage for a cheap play. And I learned that people like that don't change. They just change their target. That people who lie about therapy are capable of lying about anything. That people who lie while looking you in the eyes and saying, "I'm fighting for us," are dangerous, and that the woman you become after a trauma like that is never the same again. But that's not a bad thing. It's evolution. Today, I look at myself in the mirror with pride, not because I'm perfect, but because I survived. And more than that, I flourished, with all the scars, yes, but whole, strong, and aware of my worth. The value he tried to erase with every lame excuse, every fake hug, every hidden message. And now, it shines brighter than ever. So if you're going through something similar, let me tell you something, loud and clear. You deserve nothing less than the truth. Don't accept empty promises. Don't be fooled by pretty words if the actions are rotten. Anyone who really wants to save a relationship doesn't need to lie to do so. And anyone who lies doesn't deserve you. Break the cycle, free yourself, rebuild. Because sometimes the greatest betrayal is the one that comes disguised as love.